The overall conflict of Israel and Palestine has been brought to the forefront following the regular cycle of terrorist attacks against Israel and the international outcry of them fighting back. The common objection to Israel's right to defend themselves is that they never belonged there in the first place. The land is being occupied by the Israelis, and the Palestinians who have always lived there are actually the ones fighting back. This kind of opinion can only exist in one of two environments: ignorance or deception. Since neither are recommended for a rational worldview, the purpose of this video is to clarify the history of Israel and Palestine leading up to this conflict. First, we are going to discuss Israel's origins according to everyone. Firstly, in Judaism, according to the Hebrew scriptures, the territory known as Israel was originally occupied by Canaan, who then lost the privilege by Hashem after approximately 400 years of warnings that they would be driven out if their immoral activity continued. Abraham, the patriarch of Israel, was promised this land to his descendants in Genesis 12 and 15. Since Abraham had several groups of descendants, we see which specific group of his offspring were in mind for this promise. The children of Isaac and Jacob were the ones that Hashem sent into Canaan with miracles, including but not limited to the parting of the Jordan River during flood season, the destruction of Jericho's walls, and hailstones killing their enemies but not their forces. This was a three-stage process. First was the promise. In Genesis 12 and verse 1 we read, "Now the Lord said to Abram, Get out from your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were then in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him, and he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Now note that Hashem showed Abram what land his descendants would have, and he ended up in Canaan. The stage that followed this was the warning that was given not just to Abram, but also to those living in the land. In Genesis 15 and verse 12 we read, "Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram," that's the Lord, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs." This is in reference to Egypt. "And will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve, I will judge." This is referencing the Exodus. "Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to pass, when the sun went down, it was dark, behold, there appeared a smoking oven, and a burning torch that passed between those pieces." This is in reference to the covenant that he intended to make with Abram at this site. "But the Lord manifested in a pillar of fire and walked through it alone, saying," quote, "To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." So note the relevance of this. Hashem specifies the people groups under judgment when the fourth generation passes. None of these groups are alive today, and we'll repeat that point when it becomes relevant. The third stage was the fulfillment of this promise and this warning. We read in Joshua 2 and verse 18 when Rahab the harlot was housing two Israeli spies that were in danger because for some reason, well, let's read. Joshua 2:8. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord, this is a Canaanite woman who knows the covenant name of God, has given you the land. Where did she hear that? That the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land, not our city, of the land, are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. This would have been 40 years prior. And what you did to the two kings of the Amorites, notice specific targets, who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in us anymore because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all they have, and deliver our lives from death. So note, Rahab the Canaanite knew the covenant name of Hashem and the warnings her people had been given before and during her lifetime, going all the way back to the Exodus 40 years prior to this point in history. She and the Gibeonites are spared simply because they asked for mercy. That's worth noting. So in terms of the Hebrew, the Jewish, according to Judaism proper perspective on Israel belonging in the land that they know today, Israel was held to the same standard. They experienced temporary exiles from the land when they committed the same sins as Canaan before them during the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities. But they have since returned in accordance with the prophecy of Ezekiel 36 and Jeremiah. So, note that point. Christians who can claim somewhat neutrality in this, although there are many significant Christian sites in Jerusalem and Israel proper today, according to the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Tanakh according to the Hebrews, is the foundation and authority for who God is and how he's revealed himself in history. No Christian would reject the historical foundations of the Old Testament unless they abandoned what it means to be a Christian in the first place. We don't need to go into much details on that, but there's a reason why our Bibles include their scriptures. We recognize them as authoritative, so we would affirm every single detail that was given in this account. However, there's another religious and economic and political group involved in this process as well, Islam. And according to the Quran, the books of Exodus and Numbers are validated as historical, and the land that was mentioned in those passages is described by Allah as ordained for them. In Surah 5, verse 20, we read, And remember when Moses said unto his people, O my people, remember Allah's favor unto you, how he placed among you prophets, he made you kings, he gave you that which he gave not to any other of his creatures. O my people, listen, go to the holy land which Allah hath ordained for you. Which land? Which people? Turn not in flight, for surely ye turn back as losers. They said, O Moses. What land did Moses go to? What people joined Moses in going to this land that Allah had ordained for them? Lo, a giant people, this is referencing the book of Numbers, dwell therein, and lo, we go not in till they go forth from thence. When they go from and forth from thence, then we will enter, nor until then. Then outspake two of those who feared their Lord, men unto whom Allah had been gracious, this is referencing Joshua and Caleb, enter in upon them by the gate. For if ye enter by it, lo, ye will be victorious. So put your trust in Allah if ye are indeed believers. They said, O Moses, we will never enter the land while they are in it. So go thou and thy Lord and fight. We will sit here. And he said, My Lord, I have control of none but myself and my brothers. So distinguish between us and the wrongdoing folk. Their Lord said, for this is the land will surely be forbidden them for 40 years, that they will wander in the earth bewildered, so grieve not over the wrongdoing folk. So understand that even Islamic authoritative texts like the Quran, which Shias, Sunnis, and every other sect of Islam would recognize as authoritative, quotes from the Book of Numbers and still treats it ongoing as their land and recognizes the history behind the Old Testament as authoritative as well. But we don't even have to get religion involved in this. According to secular history, the earliest historical records of ancient inhabitants of Canaan associated with those living in the land today are in a letter written by the Pharaoh of Egypt that mentions the Hebrew people by name in the 14th century BC. They are known as the Amarna letters and are reported to be written during the reign of Amenhotep III and his son. And there's also, to verify this, another stele that describes a military victory over Israel, specifically Israel mentioned as a sovereign nation, and that they achieved victory over them 2 centuries later. This is known as the Maran Patah stele. So in conclusion, if you're religious or not, Muslim, Christian, or Hebrew, everyone points to the Israelites as the earliest inhabitants of the land that would have any connection to it today. But this isn't the end of the topic, because we need to ask where Palestine came from. When the Roman Empire took over the formerly Hellenistic and Egyptian territories they renamed Judea, it was identified as such because of the Jewish presence there. Following a revolt led by Simon Bar Kokhba in 132 AD, General Titus and several Roman legions fulfilled Jewish prophecy in scattering the Hebrew people throughout the empire, and renamed the territory that formerly bore their name, Judea, to Palestine. This wasn't in reference to the people who lived there, they had just been displaced, but their ancient enemies, the Philistines, who had been wiped out as an ethnicity by the Babylonians nearly half a millennium prior to this event by King Nebuchadnezzar. That's where the term Palestine came from, and why it was referred to as such as a territory in all references to it before 1960s. Now the question remains where the Palestinians came from. As reported in Wall Street Journal on September 22, 2003, Ayan Mihai Pasepas, the KGB's man, clarified that the creation of the Palestinian identity was a joint effort between the Soviet Union and Egyptian activist Yasser Arafat, who had his birth certificate destroyed and reprinted in Moscow to claim he was born in Jerusalem rather than Cairo. The first PLO council was convened in 1964, headed by KGB agent Ahmed Sukhari. It was founded in a mutual desire for the communist empire to destabilize Western sympathies in the Middle East and ongoing Islamic interests to wipe out the Jewish people. This was an effort that was first attempted through force of arms in 1948 and again in 1967 during the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War. The failed targeting of the Jewish state for extermination, due to being inhabited by the Jews, made them change their tactics, and now uses the false flag of Palestinian as a means of acquiring aid as refugees in order to fund their war machine in Israel. This is not Zionist propaganda, but openly bragged about in the Muslim world. This is a quote from an interview with PLO executive member Zahir Muhsin with the Dutch newspaper Trouw, provided in A History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. Quote, "The Palestinian people does not exist. The creation of a Palestinian state is only a means for continuing our struggle against the state of Israel for our Arab unity. In reality today, there is no difference between Jordanians, Palestinians, Syrians, and Lebanese. Only for political and tactical reasons do we speak today about the existence of a Palestinian people, since Arab national interests demand that we posit the existence of a distinct, quote, Palestinian people, unquote, to oppose Zionism. For tactical reasons, Jordan, which is a sovereign state with defined borders, cannot raise claims to Haifa and Jaffa, while as a Palestinian, I can undoubtedly demand Haifa, Jaffa, Beersheba, and Jerusalem. However, the moment we reclaim our right to all of Palestine, we will not wait even a minute to unite Palestine and Jordan. This is reported by James Dorsey in the Wijjin Alin Palestine om Politiek Reden. This is reported in the, again, Dutch newspaper Trouw, March 31st, 1977. The link to where you can access this is available below. So, with all of that said, why do we stand with Israel? Because the ongoing conflict is not the Palestinians defending their right, but the universally, all parties involved, secular, religious, Christian, Jew, Muslim, or not, all recognize one thing, that the Hebrew people have a right to this land that has been given to them by their God. And if that is not in fact the case even among secular perspectives, then the aggressor is rightly recognized as the Palestinians, as they themselves have openly bragged about. Only people who don't recognize this simply don't want to see it. We are not of that ilk, which is why we stand with Israel. The next episode in this series, we will be discussing the Islamic motivations of Hamas and the passages of the Quran that they go to, as well as their authoritative traditions, in order to recognize the real motivation behind this, not for a national identity, but simply because their prophet and their God ordered them to exterminate the Jews for being Jews. Until then, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.